Greetings, friends. Operational situation by the end of the 7th of March. Today we will talk in more detail about the Bakhmut-Avdeevka direction, about the Zaporozhye sector of the front, and the most important thing today will be the news background. He is perhaps really very important, from which what will be on the battlefield will be decided. Well, we'll start with the Kopinski direction, with Sinkovka. Today there were new comments about the situation in our area of Sinkovka. So there were reports that further strikes were being carried out on a number of Russian positions in the northern part of Sinkovka. We added a gray zone on the previous broadcast, so specifically in several houses the first position, the second position. Russian troops were present and new comments appeared that actually these are their advanced positions, they worked on them, but the Russian troops retain their presence. Now more information is being updated. If it is confirmed, tomorrow we will paint this area red, unfortunately. But here, yes, the enemy does have partial success. We have already said that it increases pressure, and also presses not only in the direction of Sinkovka itself, from the north to the south, but there are also a number of attempts to move further along. Therefore, the forest area, which is located northwest and west of Sinkovka, there is also some activity. By the end of the day, we observe positional fighting, and with a remark, the situation remains to be clarified. Heavy fighting continues in the Lemensky direction, in the area of the Krugaya beam. As for Yar Laptev, without significant changes, and we move on to the Bakhmut direction. Today, the fighters gave comments from the direction of Ivanovsky himself. There is information directly. There were several attacks by Russian troops, but again, the fighters wrote as is. That is, it is possible to restrain the enemy by the end of the day. That is, they did not allow further progress. But at the same time, again, the same situation as in the Avdeevka direction is now being taken in quantity. That is, to exhaust as much as possible. That is, they are working for exhaustion in this sector of the front, because during the day, there was a lot of it, but without significant changes. And we turn to the Avdeevka direction. According to Burdick, we did not record any changes. The main assault operations are now being carried out by Russian troops in the Orlovka area, in the Tonenki area. It means that with regard to Orlovka, here by the end of the day, we observe positional fighting on Orlovka itself. But with regard to the position north and south of Orlovka, the situation is a little different here. So, we see that Russian troops are trying to break through along the nameless beam, in the western direction, conditionally to Semenovka, which would allow them to enter two forest belts and then strike from the north at the positions in Orlovka. And the second point is that the activity of the southern Orlovka continues in the direction of both the summer village of Don, and indeed attempts to move in the area of the Pansky rate, between the Pansky and Zaryensky Sovek in the northern natural direction. Well, in any case, the rest of the fighting we have approximately in this area, that is, aimed at this area. At the same time, in the southern direction, I would say it was more of a distracting nature. There were assault actions on the part of the enemy in small groups, and but they did not pose a significant danger. Now, apparently, the main goal is to break through to Ilagin Street, but only the one behind Zaryensky Stavka. We do not record any significant changes. As for the thin one, we are just observing heavy fighting here. They continue. The Russian troops do not give up trying, that is, they do not change tactics, they do not regroup, they still put pressure on the settlement subtly. But the information, as in the last 5 days, without significant changes, that is, with varying success. Somewhere they managed to push them, somewhere they managed to push the Apu. That's the situation. From our side there were comments on a thin one, from their side there were comments from the Russian side, on a thin one, but the result was without significant changes. We turn to Georgievka. Here, we see that there is pressure, not only on the Kurikovsky direction of Georgievka, but also on Krasnogorovka itself. This means that there is an increased work of tactical aviation on the Russian side. Over the past 48 hours, there have been quite a large number of shots of strikes with 1.5-ton bombs. Aerial bombs with a controlled module, on Krasnogorskrovka, on the whole Georgievka district, the Kurikovsky direction. Artillery strikes are being carried out on the settlement of Ostry, Maximilievka, on a number of positions, and, accordingly, Russian troops are further conducting assault operations along Centralnaya Street, trying to gain a foothold. Here, we are not talking about the fact that there is no positional, or with varying success. Here, the enemy really has some partial success now, but whether the Russian troops will be able to gain a foothold, we will already see this in the context of 24 hours, most likely. Because yes, they really went to the central street. Well, in general, the fighting continues. The situation, as we can see, is quite complicated now in this area, and if the pressure on the thin pressure is not quite what it was before, that is, it is, but not so much the number of armored vehicles, not so much the number of naturally tactical air strikes, then the situation is changing a little in the Kurikovsky direction. Here, on the contrary, there is more pressure, with the support of armored vehicles, and accordingly, tactical aviation, air bomb attacks and missile airstrikes. According to Novomikhailivka, the situation here is difficult now. I will comment on the information that is available. So, on the previous broadcast, we added a gray zone significantly, yes. We talked about geolinking footage from drones, where the Russian troops managed to reach. This is just the same turn to Novomikhailivka itself, on the near approaches on its outskirts, passing along the beam. Then there was a counterattack from the AFU. But we are talking about fighting in approximately this area, but as for the remaining part of the two forest belts, and parallel to the settlement, along the road, and actually, like the farms themselves, there was not only pressure in the western part, from the south to Novomikhailivka, but there are also active battles on the farms. The active enemy was in a hurry, respectively, the landing and assault operations are carried out. Therefore, we are now stating the situation with varying success, but we see that, as was roughly discussed on the daytime broadcast, it is not so much a bet to break through to the center in Novomikhailivka itself, as to strike at its western part, that is, to force the AFU to retreat from a number of positions, because Russian troops really faced a number of difficulties here. In Novomikhailivka, its assaults have been going on for how many months? It was possible to repel attacks before, but naturally the enemy has a number of advantages, and accordingly it affects. Therefore, but it is also not an easy walk for the enemy, so he is now reviewing his tactics on this sector of the front, in order to put more pressure on the southwestern outskirts of Novomikhailivka. There is more emphasis on it now, as well as on farms. There are active battles. We proceed to work on. Today, we have added a red zone to the daytime broadcast with you, and by the end of the day, first of all, I will comment on the news that was. So, according to the official statement, there are, yes, twice as many attacks, in the context of 24 hours, in this sector of the front, in the Orekhovsky direction, compared with the Avdeevka sector of the front. It was the representatives of the General Staff who commented on this information today, which, in fact, we predicted with you. That activity would definitely be after some decline. They are saving up forces, and heavy fighting is going on. The situation remains on further clarification, where the red zone is we have added. A number of positions are still in question, but I would say this is more everything that is west of Verbovo, and between Verbovo and Work. As for the work itself, there are also a number of attempts to advance everything not within the gray-red zone. Again, in the area of the forest belt, the situation is being clarified here, but most likely another part is in the gray zone. Well, actually, the high pace of hostilities in this sector of the front remains, so it's too early to talk about anything specific now. Against the background of those, let's say, military operations that we had for a long time near Sinkovka, under the same Novomikhailivka, under the model, where it was possible to stabilize. Therefore, there are no specifics on this area yet, but the enemy is really attacking massively, with the widest possible coverage. It is not specifically the work that is being attacked, but even our official representatives have reported that they are trying to circumvent the work. Despite what we have talked to you, their main goal is on the Uspanovskaya beam, and actually they are putting the most pressure on it now in this direction. Naturally, along the way there are distracting blows.